Charlie. I'm on the phone. I didn't know if you had me down or not. I'm in the car, but I'm here. I'm here.
We have you. Thank you, Charlie. Sylvia, we're ready to proceed, so I'll turn it over to you right now.
Okay, thank you very much, Craig. Good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. I hope everyone had some nice time off with your families. I saw some of y'all getting some nice trips in Santos. Well, and welcome and thank you all very much for calling in today. And I'm calling the meeting to order at 9:02 a.m. And I'd like to designate Executive Director Trey Appellate to serve as the presiding officer of the meeting today. Trey will serve as the presiding officer pro tem for the executive committee meeting, which enables us to not have to travel and be there together in Austin. Trey is physically present at the Law Center, and by having him there in this capacity, no member of the committee has had to travel. And if there's no objection, I'd like to go ahead and turn this over to Trey.
Thank you, President Barunda Firth. Good morning, everyone. Our agenda, with our agenda posting for this morning, we invited members of the public to view a broadcast of the executive committee meeting, which is live at www.youtube.com/State Bar of Texas. Members of the public may also attend the meeting here at the Law Center. We have room 101 set aside for that. On the agenda, we also have provided instructions on how to sign up to speak remotely at today's meeting. Sign-ups were available until 5 p.m. yesterday. Members of the public will have the opportunity to speak under agenda item 3 and will remain in the Zoom waiting room until it is their turn to speak. Please note that this meeting will be recorded and the recording will be made available to the public. At this time, I will now call the executive committee roll call. Please say here when I call your name. Mr. Almanzon?
Here.
Mr. Baruch?
Here.
Ms. Brooker?
Here.
Mr. Calvillo?
Here.
Mr. Carlos Cardenas?
Present.
Ms. Cordova?
Here.
Ms. Barunda Firth?
Here.
Ms. Gibson?
Here.
Mr. Ginn?
Here.
Ms. Harrison?
Here.
Justice Lehrman has an excused absence. Mr. McDougall?
Here.
Ms. Rispoli will be joining us just a little later. Mr. Schrammick?
Here.
Ms. Scott?
Here.
Ms. St. Ives?
Here.
Mr. Vargas?
Here.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a quorum of the executive committee and we are ready to proceed. At this time, we would like to welcome any members of the public who have signed up to speak. Any member of the public joining us in person who wishes to speak should sign a blue sign-in card and return it to the staff. If there is a specific topic of discussion or agenda item the member of the public would like to speak on, please list that on the card. If any members of the public have signed up to speak remotely, you will remain in the Zoom waiting room until it is your turn to speak, and I will address you to indicate when you may begin. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to speak, and we will notify you when your time is complete. As of yesterday at 5 p.m., we have had no members of the public who have signed up to speak. And it's my understanding that there is no one present here at the Law Center who has signed up to speak. So the comment period is now closed. So during the remainder of the meeting, if there are board members or staff who wish to speak at any time, please raise your hand on the Zoom feature and state your name. I will call upon you when it is your turn to speak. We appreciate your patience. At this time, I'll now give the Executive Director of the State Bar of Texas report. I'd like to start out with indicating that obviously the Omicron variant has affected our planning for live events, this one included. The State Bar Board meeting on January 28th, which was scheduled for McAllen, will now be virtual. And the solo small firm CLE event that was scheduled in connection with that meeting and for that week in McAllen has also been canceled. Instead of meeting in McAllen this month, we plan to host our September 2022 board meeting in McAllen. TYLA has shifted their January board meeting to a virtual meeting as well. And as you know, we decided to cancel the January local bar leaders conference due to the pandemic. CLE sections and other departments that have in-person events in the next few weeks are monitoring the COVID-19 conditions carefully. Decisions are being made for each event on an individual basis as to whether it is held in person, virtual, or hybrid. I want to stress that our Texas Lawyers Assistance Program continues to provide 24/7 around-the-clock helpline assistance, and TLAP also maintains a wellness toolbox webpage full of resources for lawyers, judges, and law students struggling with mental health issues or needing recovery support during this very trying and difficult time. These resources are accessible through the State Bar's COVID-19 webpage at texasbar.com/coronavirus or at texasbar.com/TLAP support toolbox. I also want to stress that the State Bar remains fully operational as it has from the beginning of the pandemic. Despite all of the uncertainty and changes over the past 2 years, our volunteers and staff have remained steadfast in their devotion to the legal profession and their commitment to the State Bar's mission and the people we serve. One happy piece of news from the holidays I wanted to share with you is that our staff was able to assist 20 needy families across Texas this year with Walmart gift cards using money from our own events budget. This was in lieu of the regular giving of gifts to needy families that we normally do through the holiday party basket fundraiser, which also had to be canceled again this year due to the pandemic. So I want to thank our State Bar staff for their generous contributions to helping those 20 families. It really is very, it's needed, but it's also a very warm and touching gift. I want to update you on the ad review online portal. If you read my December TBJ column, you know about our new advertising review portal. This new tool makes it faster and more convenient for our members to submit advertisements and solicitation communications for State Bar review and approval. Early user feedback has been very positive. So I want to thank all of our staff and our leaders for getting this program pushed through. Lawyers can access the portal from their My Bar page to easily complete an advertising review application, upload media files, pay fees, and check the status of recent submissions, as well as receive status notifications from the State Bar. The new portal is the result of months of hard work by State Bar leadership and staff, and it reflects input from dozens of lawyers across the state and law firms who shared ideas on how to improve the ad review process. This is another example of the State Bar's commitment to continuous improvement. An update on the McDonald case. In September, as you know, the board approved changes to the bar rules and policies in response to the Fifth Circuit panel opinion in McDonald, which upheld the constitutionality of the majority of the bar's challenged activities. In December, U.S. District Judge Lee Yackel issued his final judgment in accordance with the Fifth Circuit panel opinion. The final judgment enjoins the State Bar from using plaintiffs' mandatory dues to support lobbying or legislative activities, including such activities by the Texas Access to Justice Commission, seeking substantive changes to Texas law unrelated to regulating the legal profession or improving the quality of legal services. Since that opinion came out, the plaintiffs have filed a petition for a writ of certiorari with the United States Supreme Court. Our legal counsel will have a more detailed report later in this meeting. I want to share with you a bit of sad news that we learned about in the last 48 hours. And if you hadn't heard, past President Alan Dubois passed away Sunday afternoon. Alan was a friend of all of ours. We notified our past presidents through our listserv, and we also notified the board that he served with. But I wanted to just share with you, if you'll bear with me, and we had a few comments come in from some of the past state bar presidents, past and current state bar presidents, and I wanted to just share with you a couple of comments that a few people shared with us, because I think it really tells the story about Alan and his wife Pam and their devotion and dedication to the legal profession and the people of Texas. One said, Alan Dubois was an inspiration for all lawyers, young and beginning, or for those who have been at it for a while. His openness and willingness to discuss and mentor saved many at various stops in their lives. This was and is a life to be remembered and revered as one of the brave. Another called Alan a true bar leader, successful lawyer, and wonderful human being. Another commented, there is a common denominator with so many of our colleagues in this small group of bar leaders. Alan was certainly one of the nicest people I ever worked with in bar activities. He maintained his involvement even after his presidency with the local bar services, and his zeal for life and the bar was energizing. Another described Alan as an example of what being a lawyer should be. Beyond that, and more importantly, he was a good human being who was thoughtful, humble, and caring. Another said, I admired Alan greatly. I had the honor of serving on the board while he was president, and he went out of his way to make me feel welcome when I did not know anyone. He also made me feel my thoughts and opinions were valued. He is one of the reasons I stayed involved with the bar after my term was over. Single-handedly, Alan did more to remove the stigma associated with addiction and mental health challenges in the legal community than anyone else. We will never know how many lives Alan saved by not only speaking up himself, but also teaching us all how to address the issue. Alan was the epitome of civility and professionalism. We are all better people for having known him. So that completes my report from the executive director. Are there any comments or questions from the committee? Being none, we'll move on to the president's report, and I will call upon President Sylvia Barunda to give her report.
Thank you very much, Trey, and thank you for that tribute to Alan. I want to thank you all for the work that's been done with regard to the advertising review and the implementation of the software. Larry will tell you that when we were out campaigning, that was frequently a complaint we received about the inefficiencies of that process. So I'm looking forward to seeing the implementation and the rollout and people using it. So let's celebrate that accomplishment, because it's something that's been a while coming, but will certainly improve services to the membership. And thank you, Trey, and thank you to the staff for all of your consistency during these very difficult times. You know, it seems like you make one step forward and two back right as we get going, and then here comes another variant to take the wind out of our sails. But y'all have kept up the good work, and I want you to know we all appreciate it. I had before the variant, I had a very busy autumn, and we counted, and I did at least 16 presentations all over the state. Everything from the Fort Bend County Bar Association to the local swearing in of the new lawyers at the 8th Court of Appeals in El Paso. I attended the Southern Conference of Bar Presidents, which is for the first time we were able to meet since the onset of COVID. I was an invited guest to the Hispanic National Bar Association meeting that was held in Houston. They were very excited to be in Houston. And after I did a presentation for them, they invited me to their board meeting. I participated in a national Latinx pre-law conference, which we'll talk about a little bit more in the future. But I was busy, and I want you to know that the lawyers are anxious to hear about what we're working on. The shutdown has made them very eager to hear from us personally. So we need to continue getting our good work, the good word out about the work that we're doing. We are planning to meet for our annual meeting in June in Houston. It's scheduled for June 9th and 10th. And I want to thank Angelica Hernandez and Denise Schofield in Houston, who have graciously agreed to co-chair the annual meeting committee. They are now working hard to secure sponsorships and sell tables, etc. And if you're interested, or your firm is interested in a sponsorship, there's a handout with the board materials and board effects that lists the different corporate sponsorship levels. We're hoping that this can be a really big event. It's been a long time since we've been able to gather together. So let's work to make this the best annual meeting ever. I want to give you an update with regard to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. And as you remember, the task force issued an extensive report at our June meeting, and the board voted to extend their work through December of 2021. And during that time, the task force in subcommittees and together met many times to continue their work. And I really want to thank them. They worked really hard to produce what I believe is going to give us a way forward on the DEI topics and a beginning of our continuing of our discussion. One of the most important things to the task force and to me personally was to ensure that the work of the task force was permanent. It was not something that was just going to evaporate at the end of my bar year. When we started down the road and we spoke with Martha Dickey about the work that was done by the task force in 2007, that was something that she pointed out. Also, past President Lisa Tatum was very adamant that we need to put something in place to make this more permanent in nature. So at the January board meeting, I'm planning to ask the board to request that the policy manual subcommittee write a policy to create a state bar diversity council. The purpose of the diversity council would be broader than just the diversity in the profession committee, and would help ensure that the state bar remains focused on DEI issues. What we're looking for, and there'll be more information about this later, is something that those of you all that are with the larger law firms probably have a DEI committee within the firm. You see it in corporate structures, and it's just a guiding force, a touchstone, something that keeps track of the metrics and make sure that you're meeting your goals with regard to DEI and setting new ones. So be looking for that at the board meeting. I also plan to ask the administrative committee to review the task force's proposed changes to the lawyer's creed. The proposed changes include statements in support of diversity inclusion in the administration of justice and the practice of the law that would align the creed with the state bar mission statement. You all will recall that the state bar mission statement does contain a statement with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And since the Texas Supreme Court and the Court of Criminal Appeals originally promulgated the creed, any proposed changes approved by the board would ultimately be submitted to those courts for consideration and possible approval. This is something that's really important to me, and I'm hoping that we can keep moving this forward. if y'all will remember, in the summer of 2020, when we had discussions, the really heated discussions about DEI, this was something that was widely requested by hundreds of lawyers. So I'm hoping for your support, and I'm hoping to see this move forward. Meanwhile, the State Bar is moving forward with 2 of the task force's recommendations. One is creating a submission process that allows speakers who train specifically in the DEI space to sign up and be a part of a curated list of presenters. When I've been out speaking on the topic and when lawyers reach out, oftentimes they say we want to include DEI topics in our seminars and our presentations, but we don't know where to find the speakers. So we're gathering information about people who speak on the topic that would be readily available for anyone to find on our webpage. And we're working on putting that together now. And we're also building an online directory of law school pipeline programs that provide support and opportunities to young people creating legal careers. As we were doing our work, we found a lot of really great programs that are already in existence. And we just wanted to collect the information and make it readily available for people to find. And finally, I'm working with the staff on plans to approach law school deans about the need for a pre-law summit to help increase diversity in the pipeline. So this goes back to my comment earlier about the Latinx admissions officers conference that I participated in. And it was a really interesting, easily accessible, all digital summit that allowed students interested in enrolling in law school an opportunity to directly speak to admissions officers. And in this case, it was all around the country. There were law schools from everything from Harvard to our local Texas schools, everything all around the country. And it was a great format and allowed people just to ask questions, which I think is important for people interested. So we're working on maybe doing that for Texas law schools. And that's going to conclude my report. But as part of my report, we have a special guest today. We have Jerry Alexander, former chair, who graciously agreed to chair the Building Planning Special Committee. So I'm going to turn it over to Jerry so that he can give you a report on what we've been working on in that committee.
Thank you, Madam President. It's great to see everyone. I'm happy to be giving a report today about 1415 Lavaca building, which is, as you know, we purchased. The purchase is now complete. And so a committee was formed with the approval of the board to figure out what the best uses for that building would be. We had our first meeting as a committee. There are 14 people on it on December 1st. And the first thing we did was we went and we toured the premises. If you haven't been over there to look at the outside and the inside, please do so the next time you can, because we want all of your ideas, because that's one of the main things we're doing here is trying to figure out what to do with this beautiful space. Structurally, it's in good shape. It is in really good shape. There's no problems, but the interior needs to be reconfigured after we figure out what the best uses are. We've divided the main committee into 3 subcommittees, one of which will look at what the staff needs or the State Bar of Texas needs would be for the space, what they could use it for. The second one is for the use of the building by State Bar members as a venue, perhaps. They can have their have weddings there, have whatever there. And the third would be what we could do for the public. Maybe have some, maybe have a thing that kind of has a museum quality about it. But those are just initial ideas. There's 3 subcommittees. If you have any ideas, please get those to Paul or Ray or me or anybody that's on one of the committees. We have budget considerations to consider. For this year, $500,000 has already been approved for construction and for architects. There's $700,000 in construction approved for the next bar year, 22-23. That is subject to board approval. And then operations, $500,000 for 21-22 and 22 and 23. The present fiscal step that the committee is doing is we've sent out a request for quote to a number of architecture firms that are familiar with working with historical buildings. This is a historical building, but the only thing that's really historical about it is, as far as I can see or tell, is there's some interior walls, and those actually add a lot to the space. So I don't think it's going to be a problem on what the architects can come up with to do. But we've had a number of great ideas architecturally. Of course, we'll have to speak with the professionals about that. But we could obviously use it for meeting spaces, especially like for section meetings. We could use it for educational components. And also we could have there's a tremendous potential in the outdoor area. There's an enclosed outdoor area that we could put a roof on and have a rooftop situation like the Texas Young Lawyers Association does, or we could leave it open and have outside things. That's going to be done with the architecture. Lastly, at some point in time, there will be considerations about what to name the building. We know that we have to be careful about that, but the building does not have to be named after a person. It can be named, whatever. Although at some point in time, there may be a need for money, and there may be some donors that want to put their name on something, but there'd be interior rooms and things like that we could do too. So that's really about the end of the report. Now, the subcommittees will be having their own meetings in the next 30 days, their first meetings. But if you have any ideas for the space, please get them to us, and we will continue to keep you updated and advised. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful asset for us. And now we have protected our campus. And I'd just like to say it's wonderful to see everyone, and I hope everybody stays well. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Jerry. And I'm looking forward to what great things with that building. That was another often discussed issue when I was campaigning, the need for meeting space for sections and state bar business. So hopefully we'll be able to address some of that. I have two action items, and the first is with regard to an amicus brief. In late December, the board's ad hoc submission committee approved the State Bar Appellate Section's request for expedited approval to file an amicus brief in the Mitchell case, which is currently before the Texas Supreme Court. Oral arguments in the case are scheduled for February 3rd of 2022, and a copy of the brief was submitted with your materials. The case involves appellate procedural issues, and the appellate section has stated that its interest in the case is purely academic and that it has no stake in the ultimate resolution on the merits. Specifically, the brief asserts that the section has an interest in having the Supreme Court clarify 2 points. First, when a motion for new trial filed in an original case instead of a severed case is effective to extend the appellate deadlines for the severed case. And number two, how Texas Rule of Appellate Procedure 41.3 applies when a transferee court identifies a conflict in the transferor court's decisions. At this time, I'd like to move that the executive committee approve ratification of the ad hoc committee decision to approve the filing of the amicus brief by the appellate section.
All right, we have a motion from President Barun Deferk to approve the ratification of the ad hoc submission committee's decision regarding to grant approval of the appellate section's request to file the amicus brief in the case she mentioned. Coming from a committee, no second is needed. Any director who wishes to comment, now would be the time. Is there any discussion? All directors who are in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Trey. And then my last order of business and action item is the approval of the minutes from our meeting on August 31st of 2021, executive committee meeting. So I've moved to to approve the minutes as they were presented. They are part of your materials.
We have a motion by President Barunda Firth to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
Second.
And we have a second from Director David Cavillo. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Motion carries.
Thank you, Trey.
Thank you. Thank you, President Barunda Firth. We appreciate it. Mr. Alexander, we appreciate your time as well. Next item on the agenda is the report from the chair of the board, and I'll call upon Chair Santos Vargas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Executive Director. I have a very brief report today. The first section of my report deals with the race for the chair of the board position. The deadline has now passed for second-year directors to submit letters of intent to run for next year's chair of the board. We received letters of intent from 4 very qualified, excellent candidates, 2 of which are with us today. They are Mr. Chad Baruch of Dallas, Mr. David Calvillo of Houston, Miss Lucy Forbes of Houston, and Mr. Todd Smith of Austin. The candidates will be announced at the January board meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. Also at that meeting, the board will consider and will approve the method of voting to be used for the chair election at the April meeting. For example, that could be either by show of hands or a written ballot. Those procedures will be decided at the January board meeting. And then the second portion of my report deals with one of our beloved public members. For those of you who don't know, our public member, Dr. Maria Hernandez Ferrier, has resigned from the board due to the fact that she's moved out of the state and actually out of the country. For those of you who got to know Dr. Ferrier, she was truly a great asset to our board. We will really miss her leadership, her wealth of knowledge, her experience. However, we do wish her very well, and her replacement has not yet been named. However, we hope that it is somebody of the same quality as Dr. Ferrier. And with that, that concludes the report from the chair of the board.
Thank you, Chairman Vargas. Any comments from the directors? Moving to the next item on the agenda, we now have the report from the President-elect, Laura Gibson. President-elect Gibson, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. The Omicron variant has been really bad in Houston as well. I was supposed to be picking a jury this morning at NRG, but one of our plaintiffs' lawyers came down with COVID on Saturday. And in our discussion with our judge yesterday, she said that none of the cases in Harris County that were scheduled to start this week are going because of similar situations. So please stay safe during these challenging times. I have been busy, not as busy as President Firth. I did get to attend the Southern Conference of Bar Presidents in Orlando in October. And it was really nice to meet a lot of our peers from across the country and learn from them about best practices to make our bar even better. I can tell you that Texas is very well regarded in the Southern Conference of Bar Presidents as a leader in innovation and serving our members and the public. Also, I wanted to have you mark your calendars now because next year from October 27th through the this year, October 27th through the 29th of 2022, Texas will be hosting the Southern Conference of Bar Presidents in Austin. So we'll be working on planning a very robust program so that we can show off our state and all of our wonderful lawyers in the state of Texas. I've also been busy with the Redistricting Task Force, which President Firth appointed me to, and chairing the Budget Committee. And I'll talk about both of those now. First, with the Redistricting Task Force, we are charged with reviewing the apportionment of the state bar districts to determine whether there are any changes that should be made. Now, the last change to the director positions was made in 2012 when a director position was moved from Houston to Austin to account for the expanded growth and population of attorneys in the Austin area. But since that time in 2012, there haven't been any changes, and we're studying whether any changes are appropriate. We've already had several meetings to discuss that. We've heard from Steve Fisher, who gave us his ideas on redistricting. We've noted that in North Texas in particular, we've seen a significant growth in the number of lawyers in those areas, and we're trying to evaluate whether a change should be made in order to take that into account. We also want to get feedback from our attorney members. So in the January Texas Bar Journal, there's an article that explains what we're doing and invites input from all of our Texas lawyers. We've received several comments so far, and we're encouraging people to give us their input and advice at this point so that we can take those under consideration. So we are scheduling an upcoming meeting, and we'll be having further conversations, and we'll be reporting on our progress at the January meeting that will be held remotely later this month. So that concludes my report with regard to the redistricting task force, and I'm happy to entertain any questions or comments.
At this time, I would call for any of the directors. If you have any comments, now's your opportunity. Laura, can you update us on the work of the Budget Committee?
Yes, I'm happy to. So the budget for 2022-23 is the first budget that will be drafted to comply with the changes that we made to the board policy at our meeting in San Antonio in September. And it's important for you to know that the Budget Committee is charged with assisting the executive director in preparing the annual budget. And we reviewed the budget items to make sure that we identified any expenditures that may be considered non-chargeable to members under Keller and now McDonald. In order to fulfill the obligations of the Budget Committee, we met 6 times over the last 6 months, and we reviewed all of the budgets of the State Bar, both major and minor budgets. Additional documentation was drafted for our committee to review, which totaled over 500 pages. This was a huge undertaking by the staff and the committee members. The staff spent over 400 hours detailing their budgets, programs, and activities, and documenting how those expenditures further the State Bar's purposes and goals to ensure that only germane expenditures are included in our budget. During the Budget Committee meeting, we had healthy discussion on the budgets with the State Bar staff. And our meetings were held on September 21, October 14, November 17, December 7, December 13, and an all-day meeting in Austin on December 14. We heard from representatives of the State Bar divisions and the departments, and the committee approved the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget as presented. A 5-page copy of the proposed budget, which includes the new dues allocation statement that we have created in order to comply with McDonald, is included in your packet at pages 28 through 32. We did have a robust discussion about the use of board commitments to fund what may be considered operational expenses, such as the technology fund. And Trey Apfel and Terry Jarrett have committed to the Budget Committee to come back to our committee by May of this year with a proposal on how to handle budgeting of operational expenses next budget so that we don't continue to use board commitments to fund operational costs. And that's so that the committee can address any concerns about that before next year's budgeting process begins. If approved by the executive committee today, the board at the January by the board at our January meeting, our proposed budget as presented in the packet will be published in the March 2022 issue of the Texas Bar Journal. Now, the dues allocation page, which is pages 4 and 5 of our budget, is the new document created to show what expenditures are paid for with bar dues. This allocates dues to expenditure categories in total and by the amount of dues category so that any member can know exactly how much of their dues are utilized to pay for certain expenditure categories within the budget. The dues allocation is considered to be part of the official budget, and the Audit and Finance Committee has engaged the audit firm of Weaver to review and issue a report on the methodology and mathematical accuracy of the dues allocation. Their agreed upon audit procedures will be presented to the board later in January. So some of the budget highlights. The total budgeted general fund revenues is $43,776,922, which is an increase of 1% from the prior year's adopted budget. The total budgeted general fund expenditures and transfers is $44,760,547, which is a 3.1% increase from the prior year's adopted budget. The budget for salaries is 3.8% higher than the salary budget for the current budget, which is the 21-22 budget. And this increase is in line with trends over the past 10 years. The number of full-time employees, or FTEs, budgeted for 2022-2023 increased by 2.62 full-time positions, bringing the total full-time employees to 265.63. I hate to have to be that 0.63 person for the general fund. This includes a new position for lawyer referral and a new position within the law practice management division. Now, due to significant savings realized by the bar in 2021, primarily due to our meeting remotely and limiting our travel and conference expenses, the total amount available for commitment by the bar board is $7,610,066. This amount represents the excess funds from the 2020-2021 financial operations, and that has already been audited. After hearing from the executive director and the state bar staff, the budget committee plans to make the following recommendations to the board at the January meeting for commitment of the available funds. Number one, we're going to designate $2,041,833 to replenish the level of minimum reserves from 2.5 months to 3.1 months of operating expenditures, bringing the total amount held in reserves to $11,408,307. This brings our reserves to the level that they were at before the board voted to purchase the 1415 Lavaca building. So that's a huge achievement. Number two, we're going to designate $983,625 to fund the operations of the state bar for fiscal year 2022-23. Budgeted revenues increased by only 1%, which is equivalent to $371,744 from fiscal year 2022 to fiscal year 2023. However, during pre-pandemic years, budgeted revenues increased on average of 3%, or approximately $1.2 million from one year to the next. It's anticipated that our revenues will return to pre-pandemic levels by the end of fiscal year 2023. However, this funding from unspent savings will allow operations and programs to continue until revenues recover from the pandemic. Number three, the budget envisions committing $150,000 to raise the balance maintained in the legal reserve account. This additional $150,000 will bring the total reserve to $500,000. Number four, this budget commits $49,696 to raise the balance maintained as a reserve for future presidential initiatives to $200,000. The balance in the presidential initiatives account is not reflective of money to be spent in any given year, but it is maintained to ensure that money is set aside and available for future initiatives and to fund prior presidential initiatives. Number five, we're going to commit $800,000 to the Client Security Fund. This commitment, when combined with the $500,000 annual transfer from the general fund and the $200,000 board commitment from fiscal year 2021-22, will bring the total contribution to the Client Security Fund to $1,500,000 for this proposed year, which is huge. Number six, This budget commits $300,000 for the ATJF Student Loan Repayment Assistance Program. The Student Loan Repayment Assistance Program provides assistance to attorneys who work full-time for Texas legal aid programs that meet certain requirements. Number 7, this budget commits $1,500,000 to the State Bar's Technology Fund. This commitment will fund in part the purchase and maintenance of the State Bar's technological hardware and software, including computers, printers, software, and software maintenance and upgrades. In addition, it will fund special capital projects, including the procurement of a new Chief Disciplinary Counsel case management software program. Number 8, this budget commits $1,248,502 to the building fund. These are funds that are needed for the anticipated renovation and repair of the 1415 Lavaca building and to supplement repairs and renovations needed at the Law Center. Renovations will be needed for the Law Center building to address engineering repairs that may be needed as the building ages. And in addition to the $288,800 annual transfer from the general fund, this commitment will bring the total contribution to the building fund to $1,537,302. Number 9, and this is especially fitting in light of our dear friend Alan Dubois' passing, this budget commits $500,000 to the Sheeran Crowley Lawyer Wellness Trust. The Patrick D. Sheeran and Michael J. Crowley Lawyer Wellness Trust provides the financial help to Texas attorneys, judges, and law students who need treatment for substance abuse, depression, and other mental illnesses. And with the demands on this fund during the pandemic, we came very close to bottoming out of this fund. So this is very important to fund. And 10, this budget will commit $78,343 to replenish the reserves maintained for future membership rules votes. The board commitment would bring the rules vote reserves to $150,000. Now, if there are any questions about any of the information I presented and anything included in our proposed budget, I will shamelessly direct them to our wonderful Tracy Jarrett, who will be happy to answer your questions.
Hey, Laura, this is Adam. I have a question, and I think it's just a terminology issue. I've been looking at the budget here.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain to me the concept of board commitments and how it ties to the 5.7 million in reserves being used from this budget, if at all? I mean, I just don't understand that concept. And in my nonprofit world, a board commitment is what the board members write a check for, right? I know that's not what this is, but I'm just trying to understand, what is the board commitment? I don't understand.
The board commitment is the money that we have in excess from previous operations. So basically, during 2020, 2021, because we were not meeting and we were not traveling, a lot of things that were budgeted in that budget were not spent. So those funds then are put back in to fund our operations from savings from previous years.
Okay, so it's equivalent with the reserves, money we take out of the reserves to the budget. Okay, got it.
Yes.
Well, I mean, the reserves are held so that, essentially so that we can pay our bills if we don't have any money. We were able to pay our bills, but we saved more money than we had projected to spend because everything shut down, which allowed us more money, and we're using that money to fund future operations.
Got it. Thank you.
David Cavillo?
Yes, I wanted to, let me lower my hand. I just wanted to comment that that Trey and his staff did an excellent job of using this robust and rigorous budgetary process as a management tool. Not only were they required to do the budget to comply with the special requirements of the McDonald case and also just generally good management, but they used those 400 hours that Laura mentioned to identify ways in which they could streamline things. And it also gave them, I think, gave them and us on the budget committee a chance to see the overall big picture in maybe a new and more thorough way. So Thank you, Trey, for doing that. The second thing that I wanted to convey is to encourage all of our members, all of the directors, to look at the dues allocation and perhaps a different way, in that it is probably the most visible response to the McDonald case and its aftermath, especially in light of the Judge Yackel's judgment. But it's much simpler than it looks. It can be intimidating because you see all these numbers on a spreadsheet, et cetera, but it's much simpler than it would appear. And so I would encourage you to dive into it, look at it, understand it. If you have any questions, anybody on the budget committee can certainly chime in and respond. And if not, you're welcome to email me, but it's much simpler. Don't be intimidated. Thank you.
And thank
I'll
you
just
for your
say-
hard work on the budget committee, David.
I was going to say, I looked at the dues allocation, of course, because I'm interested in the McDonald case, et cetera. I think it looks great. I think it's simple to read. I think it's very easy to understand. And I think it's a great job.
Yeah, the state bar staff, I cannot overstate how hard they worked. I mean, they worked tirelessly, and we heard from everybody. And the budget committee was very engaged. I was very proud of how much hard work that the budget committee put in on December 13th and 14th when we were in Austin. No question that we asked was unanswered. The information we got was amazing. Our bar is in great hands, and we're doing a great job as stewards of the dues money that we have.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. President-elect Gibson, do you have a motion with regard to the 2022-2023 proposed budget?
Yes, I do. On behalf of the Budget Committee, I move that the State Bar's proposed budget for fiscal year 2022-23 be approved for presentation to the board and for publication in the March 22 issue of the Texas Bar Journal.
The motion is on the floor from President-elect Gibson, coming from a committee. No second is needed. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no hands, all directors who are in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Motion passes unanimously. I want to thank President-elect Gibson and her leadership and the Budget Committee for their diligent work over the course of not only 2 days here at the Law Center, but leading up to the meeting. There was a tremendous amount of materials to review and digest leading up to that. Everyone came in well prepared and did a great job. Director Cavillo and President-elect Gibson, I will accept graciously your kind words on behalf of our staff. They hit it out of the park on this. They just did a tremendous job. They saw this as an opportunity, Director Cavillo, as you said, to kind of look inward for all of our operations moving forward. And I think I'm proud to report that we have a good product in place. And Director Schrammick, your comments about the dues allocation statement, those are very meaningful. That's what we wanted it to be. We wanted it to be plain, concise, and easy to understand. So again, I commend all of our staff for the work that they put in on this budget. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the report from our immediate past president Larry McDougall.
Mr. Appel, I have no report today.
Thank you, President McDougall. Next item on the agenda is a report from our Nominations and Elections Subcommittee, co-chaired by past Chair Charlie Ginn and immediate past President Larry McDougall.
Well, I guess with apologies to everybody, normally I would not be in a car during this meeting, and I apologize to Madam President Sylvia, Madam President-elect Laura, and Larry, and Trey, and Santos. Larry, since I'm in a car, I've got the notes here. I'm stocked, but I just as soon have you report. I don't think it's very, very big.
I'm glad you got the notes because I don't.
Well, I got the notes. I can do it. That's no problem. So this is not a very long report. Our report's going to be pretty brief. As you know, in September, The board selected candidates to run for State Bar President-elect. That's Cindy Tisdale of Granbury and Joe Escobedo of Edinburgh. There are no petition candidates that we're aware of this year. There have been challenges for campaigning again this year, but they are doing the best they can under these circumstances. And I know they'll continue to run a very fair race. The bar will be sending out emails containing campaign messages of both candidates here moving forward, similar to what we've done the past several years. It's another effort to educate members about the candidates.
Hey, Charlie, could I interrupt you for just a second?
Yes.
Excuse me, just so that we have a clear record, can you turn your camera on while you are speaking during the meeting?
I can. I thought it was on. I can't see it because of my stupid phone.
Now you're on.
Okay. I think the problem, okay, I can do that. So let me see one thing here and then I'll get off of it. Am I on there, Trey?
No, you just blacked out.
Oh, good. How about
there
that?
You are. You're on now.
All right. All right. As you may recall in September, we are going to have two forum events for our candidates, one in March and one in April. More information on that to come. We are very excited about the races that our candidates are running right now. I know that will just get faster and take more energy as we get closer to the election in March. But we've not really had any complaints at all. At least I haven't. And so we really appreciate Cindy and Joe and the races they're running. Also be aware that at the same time, our director races will be running. There's a list on the website of what regions and districts will need directors. So if you know anybody that would like to run, please tell them to contact us or to get on the website. With that, Larry, unless you have anything else, I think that completes our report.
I think that about covered it, Charlie.
All right, man. And again, I'm sorry, y'all, for the inconvenience of being on the car. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, past chair again, and past President McDougall. Are there any comments from directors? Seeing no hands, we'll move on to the next item, and that's a report from our policy manual subcommittee, and I'll call on Adam Schrammick.
So we have no report today, but we look forward to President Firth's referral on the new diversity committee, and I expect to have one next time.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Schrammick. Next item on the agenda is a report and update from our Audit and Finance Committee, and I'll call on Director David Carrillo for that report.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Yes, it's still morning. The Audit and Finance Committee have really worked hand in glove with the Budget Committee in responding to the new challenges that we face after McDonald. And today we're going to cover three basic things as I see it. One is the updated financial position of the State Bar for the first 6 months of the new fiscal year. Then we're going to discuss some internal audit, the new engagement for the new firm, and then third, talk about the financial audit for the previous fiscal year. So the first thing for the first 6 months, as of November 30th, because again, remember it takes a while to update the financial statements, but as of November 30th, 2020, those are the most recent financial statements we have for the State Bar, or for the State Bar's financial condition as of this point. We have an excess of revenues over expenditures, which is a good thing, of about $3.5 million. That is different than what we budgeted, but again, that variance between what was budgeted and what was actual is to our benefit. We have $3.5 million in revenues over expenditures, more so than we budgeted for a couple of reasons. One, we've had an increase in the dues and in the MCLE that were greater than we had anticipated. So that's one thing, about $700,000 or so increase in revenues than we budgeted. And then our expenditures were less than we'd anticipated. The reason for that sound familiar in this second year of the pandemic is that we had expenditures of less than $2.9 million than we thought because of travel, because of the savings that result from that. So overall, The state bar remains in a very strong financial position. Our budget reflects that we're even better than we budgeted for. So that's good. That's a good conservative budget. We also re-engaged the McConnell and Jones firm to perform the internal audit. The internal audit, as you'll remember, is a different function than the external audit. The internal audit does not focus on the financial statements, but rather focuses inward on the operations of the state bar to make sure that all of the controls, internal accounting controls are in place. And this year, the McConnell and Jones firm will focus on, or have been focusing on, the MCLE department, the IT department, and the Public Funds Investment Act compliance. And so the result of those audits in those three areas will be presented at the January board meeting. Now dealing with the financial audit, which focuses on the financial statements as of the last fiscal year ending May 31st, 2021. That report has been completed now. We've got a clean, unmodified opinion, which is what everybody wants when you engage an accounting firm, an auditing firm to review your financial statements. Those reports were prepared in accordance with all the appropriate professional standards, and in general, they will make a recommendation to the board, or the Audit and Finance Committee will make a recommendation to the board at the January meeting that we accept the financial audit report. There is a report that the Weaver firm has prepared directly to us that you can look at, and it summarizes some of the efficiencies that they noted and some of the quality control areas that they think we might want to be aware of. The other thing that the Weaver firm does as part of the audit process now is they review that dues allocation that some of us have talked about. And what they do, what they've done is they've kind of attached their imprimatur to the methodology and the mathematical accuracy of that dues allocation procedure. As I've mentioned, it is very simple. It is not as intimidating as it looks. And so this review by the Weaver firm as part of the audit gives an extra little pat on the back to the process and to its accuracy. So we think it should add a little bit more emphasis and a little bit more approval to what's been done so far in that dues allocation process, which is the most visible response, I think, of the bar to the McDonald opinion. And that's all I have to report.
Are there any questions or comments from any directors? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is a report from the Discipline and Client Attorney Assistance Decap Subcommittee. And I'll call on Director Diane St. Ives for the report.
Thank you, Trey. Good morning, everybody. With the help of Ray Cantu, we have been moving a lot in the last several months. We still have some ways to go, but just generally, we've been busy reviewing the recommendations that were made by the Public Protection Grievance Review and Client Security Fund Task Force report. And this was referred to us back in June by the board. As we reported in September, we divided up the task force into 3 subcommittees so that we could look at, we divided up the recommendations in the task force by committee so that we could get a really close look at it. We've been gathering information and statistics from the Chief Disciplinary Counsel's office to give us an idea of the disciplinary system and how it's functioning. We're thankful for Shauna Willing, the Chief Disciplinary Counsel. She's been really helpful in getting us the information we need and answering questions. We've also been getting input from the stakeholders within the grievance system. For example, my subcommittee met with regional councils from the CDC. We got a nice cross-section from across the state. And we met with them and asked for some feedback, asked them some open-ended questions so that maybe we could get some really good information, and we did. They were very helpful. Each individual subcommittee, A, B, and C, we're wrapping up our reports, and we'll still have some meetings with the Client Security Fund staff and committee to gather more information about that program. We will develop our recommendations and put all this information into a report for the board's consideration in April or at the latest June. And this concludes our report.
Are there any questions or comments from any directors? Thank you, Director St. Ives. Members of the committee, at this time, we've been going for just over an hour. It is 11:06, and I want to give everybody a 5-minute recess before we complete the remainder of the agenda. So we'll take our 5-minute recess now. All right, directors, I have 11:12 now, and we are back from our recess, and we'll continue on with item number 12 on our agenda. And it's comes from the Administration Committee, and we'll have a report, and we'll call on Director Rebecca Steely-Brooker for her report.
Thank you, Trey. I'm pleased to report on the Administration Committee's activities over the last few months. We recently received recommended changes to the Texas Rules of Evidence from the State Bar Administration of Rules of Evidence Committee, also known as AREC, A-R-E-C. We also recently received recommended changes to the Texas Rules of Appellate Procedure from the State Bar Court Rules Committee. And so today, the Executive Committee, we can decide whether to approve the referral of each recommendation to the Supreme Court of Texas for consideration. So assuming the Executive Committee and the full board approve the referrals, there would still be an opportunity for review by the Supreme Court to its Supreme Court Advisory Committee before any change would potentially take place. And this is very important. It is ultimately up to the court whether to adopt a change. It is not up to us and our board. And if the court is going to consider the change, then they would have an opportunity to take public comments and so forth. So in just a little bit more detail on the rules that we were looking at recently. First was to the Texas Rules of Evidence 503B1C. The first recommendation from AREC deals with the Texas Rules of Evidence 501B1C and the lawyer-client privilege. AREC has recommended amending this provision to include anticipated litigation. So in summary, the proposed change would allow communications with counsel for other parties and related actions that are not yet filed to remain privileged where there's a common interest. And that proposed change would bring Texas law into conformity with the Fifth Circuit law that's in place. A memo about this change, and actually all of the changes are included in your materials, and the text of it's in the materials if you want to review it, if you have not already had an opportunity to review it. So the Administration Committee, we met in December. We voted to approve this referral of AREC's recommendation to the Supreme Court for consideration. So now I have a motion, Trey. On behalf of the Administration Committee, I move that the Executive Committee approve the referral of the recommendation from the State Bar Administration of Rules of Evidence Committee regarding Texas Rules of Evidence 501B1C to the Supreme Court of Texas for consideration.
Thank you, Director Brooker. The motion on the floor is with regard to Texas Rule of Evidence 503B1C as stated, coming from a committee. No second is needed. Is there any discussion? Seeing no hands, we will vote. All directors who are in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion passes. Director Brooker.
Thank you, Trey. I've got a few more, guys, so just hang with me. The second recommendation from AREC would amend the Texas Rules of Evidence 803-16, which deals with the ancient documents hearsay exception to make it consistent with the federal ancient document exception. So currently, the Texas rules accept from the hearsay rule, and I'll quote, a statement in a document that's at least 20 years old with authenticity, whose authenticity is established, end quote. In 2017, though, the federal rules of evidence were amended to change the 20-year requirement to instead be based on a specific date. So under the federal rules, the ancient documents exception applies to quote, a statement in a document that was prepared prior to January 1st, 1998, and whose authenticity is established, end quote. So the proposed change tracks the federal provision and is intended to address concerns about admitting unreliable electronically stored information. So a memo, again, on this is all in your materials. Any vote that we have is really not changing anything. It's just making a recommendation for review. So the administration committee met in December, and again, we voted to approve this referral of ARAC's recommendation to the Supreme Court for consideration. So on behalf of the administration committee, I move that the executive committee approve the referral of the recommendation from the State Bar Administration of Rules of Evidence Committee regarding Texas Rules of Evidence 803-16 to the Supreme Court of Texas for consideration.
The motion on the floor by Director Brooker deals with Texas Rule of Evidence 803-16 as stated, coming from a committee. No second is needed. Is there any discussion?
I'd just like to add that I'm on the ERIC, I don't know how to say it, ERIC committee, I'm on it. And we had a long discussion about this one and ultimately got unanimous conclusion that this was a good change. And it's not just because my law school exams will no longer be ancient documents under the 20-year rolling rule. So, but anyway, I think it's a good change. I just wanted to add that in.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Director Schrammick. Any other directors have any comments or questions? Thank you. And I would just remind members of the committee, please stay on your camera during the voting process so that we have a record. So all of those in favor of the motion as stated, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Say nay. Motion carries. Director Brooker.
Thank you. I think this is the last one. So the Court Rules Committee has recommended amending the Texas Rules of Appellate Procedure 6.5D, which currently exempts a withdrawing lawyer from certain procedural requirements if the client will continue to be represented by counsel by way of substitution. However, in some cases, a client will continue to be represented by counsel in the appellate court without a substitution. So a common example is where a partner and associate are at the same firm and they appear on behalf of the client. And then what often will happen is an associate moves to a different firm. They move on. So to simplify withdrawal motions in such cases, the proposed change would exempt a withdrawing attorney from including certain information in their withdrawal motion if they are not lead counsel and the lead counsel continues to represent the client in the appellate court. So a memo from the Court Rules Committee that includes the text to the proposed change is included in your materials. The Administration Committee, excuse me, we met in December and talked about this as well at length, and we have made a recommendation to approve the referral of the Court Rules Committee recommendation to the Supreme Court for consideration. Therefore, on behalf of the Administration Committee, I move that the Executive Committee approve the referral of the recommendation from the State Bar Court Rules Committee regarding Texas Rules of Appellate Procedure 6.5D to the Supreme Court of Texas for consideration.
The motion on the floor from Director Brooker deals with Texas Rule of Appellate Procedure 6.5D as stated, coming from a committee. No second is needed. Is there any discussion? All directors in favor of the motion as stated, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Director Brooker, thank you for your excellent summary and explanation of three very intricate proposed rules changes. You did a great job. Thank you for your effort on that.
Well, and thank you to Brad and the rest of your team. They help tremendously. Trey, I am prepared to give a brief report on the performance measures and strategic planning subcommittee on behalf of Mr. Michael Hurst, Director Hurst.
Yes, ma'am.
The subcommittee met in December to begin its discussion of strategic planning. The group identified some initial areas of interest for the strategic planning and will be meeting again later this month in January with Elizabeth Dorico, who I know the many members of the bar have worked with in the past. The subcommittee plans to keep meeting regularly to discuss strategic planning goals and ideas, and that concludes that report.
Unless it's said.
Thank you, Director Brooker. And the performance measures and strategic planning item on the agenda was under item 12B.
B.
Thank you.
Sorry.
And are there any comments from the directors on the performance measures and strategic planning report? Seeing no hands, we'll keep moving forward. I do note that President Janine Rispoli from Texas Young Lawyers Association has joined the meeting. Welcome in, President Rispoli. Next item on the agenda is number 13, the ad hoc committee to select at-large directors, and I'll call on Director Andy Almazan to give the report.
Thank you, Trey, and thank you, everyone. Our meeting in which to provide interviews for the ad hoc interview selection process occurred last week, and we have 10 candidates from across the state that we are granting interviews. Those interviews will be conducted on February the 3rd. We were initially trying to get everyone to Austin for in-person interviews, but unfortunately, as everyone can see the trend, and because of Austin's numbers and situation, it would be most prudent to perform those interviews by Zoom, which we did last year very successfully, I might add. And so we are going to interview the 10 candidates on Thursday the 3rd. There is a panel of 5 of us in which we give the candidates about 20 minutes of interview questions, at the conclusion of which we then convene and we make a recommendation of the top 4 candidates to recommend to the president for her interviews of those 4 candidates, and then she will select 2 to appoint. This is a year in which we're going to have 2 vacancies, myself included, as well as Luis Cardenas in June. And so this is a year that our president, Sylvia Firth, is going to be able to replace 2 candidates for at-large positions. We have very strong candidates. We feel very confident that of the 10 individuals that we'll be interviewing on the 3rd, it's going to be a hard decision to come down to 4. But when we do make that decision of 4, we're going to be very proud to submit those 4 to Sylvia. And next year, we'll have 2 additional at-large directors serving 3-year terms. Are there any questions? Doesn't sound like there's any questions, but I am available. And thank everyone for your support, and thank my committee members and the staff that will be participating on February 3rd.
Thank you, Director Almanzon. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a report from our Member Services and Education Committee and the Insurance Member Benefits Subcommittee. And I'll call on Director Christina Davis for that report.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I have a very brief report. I'm just going to touch on the Texas Bar Private Insurance Exchange and then a couple real quick subcommittee projects. So starting with Texas Bar Private Insurance Exchange, the 2022 federal health insurance open enrollment ends on January 15th. Got about 4 days. We currently have 62,659 product enrollments, and major medical enrollments alone total 14,798. With a growing number of our attorneys in Texas reaching retirement ages, we're following the lead from other board projects and putting some attention on succession planning. The plan is to have a portal that highlights products specifically to help members plan for retirement and to be ready for the unexpected. And we hope to keep the board updated, but to roll out this during Laura Gibson's year. We are reviewing the possibility of adding guaranteed issue life insurance as a complementary benefit. This would replace the underutilized supplemental health insurance. And then moving on to some subcommittee projects. Here are some of the projects that this year's subcommittee is looking into, starting with Bank of America. Dating back to the 90s, the bar has partnered with Bank of America to offer banking services. That agreement ends this upcoming June. Most bars have had a similar offer, and we are one of the last to still have it. But Bank of America is exiting the affinity market. So this agreement has generated roughly $70,000 in non-dues revenue annually. And to continue offering banking services, the subcommittee is reviewing an offer with Visa through ICM, which stands for Investor Cash Management. There's a new travel offer. Travel is the most popular benefit to our members. One category we needed to improve on is vacations. We will be exploring the addition of discounted cruises and vacation tours. And benefit program marketing. In addition to the monthly benefits emails and the weekly social media posts members receive regarding the benefits available, postcard and special offers, emails specific to new lawyers. Revenue for the program has been stable this year. There's been about $350,000 in non-dues revenue generated as of October, which is in line with prior years. And that concludes my report. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, seeing no questions, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Director Davis. Next item on the agenda is number 15, a report from our section rep to the board, Deborah Cordova. Deborah?
Thank you and good morning. The sections are strong and continuing to do great work on behalf of their members. Last fiscal year, membership was down slightly across the board, with some sections even seeing as much as a 15% drop in membership. Their membership numbers have largely recovered this fiscal year, with many sections actually achieving an increase from pre-pandemic levels. The sections department has worked with sections throughout the pandemic to pivot to virtual programming and member benefits, and then some return to normalcy. But just like with everything else, they're moving most events and meetings back to a virtual format for the month of January and February. The section representatives to the board will have 2 openings for 3-year terms for the upcoming year. One for a representative from a large section, which is 2001 members and above, and one for a representative for a medium section, 501 members to 2000. Applications will go out early next week. If you know of someone that is active and knowledgeable about the state bar sections, please encourage them to apply. The Council of Chairs was also scheduled to meet at the Law Center on the 25th of February. However, the Leadership and Section Representative Committee both feel that it's important that the section chairs have an opportunity to meet live since they have not done so since the pandemic began. So we're currently looking at postponing the meeting to late March or early April to give us a better chance at having a live meeting. I'd also like to thank Tracy Knuckles for all of her hard work and dedication to the sections. As everyone knows, she is phenomenal. And Mr. Executive Director, that concludes my report.
Are there any questions or comments for Director Cordova? Seeing no hands, thank you, Director Cordova. We agree. Tracy Knuckles and her team are incredible. Thank you very much. Our next item on the agenda is a report from our Texas Young Lawyers Association, and immediate past president Brittany Harrison will give that report.
Thank you, Trey. And I'll be brief. We will be having our TYLA board meeting next Friday and Saturday virtually. This is our big nominations meeting where we'll be selecting our next slate of officers, so our leadership. So it's always an exciting meeting, a little bit stressful, but it's a great way to put in place our leaders for the future. We will also be hosting the State Bar of Texas president-elect candidates on Saturday to learn a little bit more about their campaigns and just learn a little bit more about them as candidates. And the board has been busy per usual working on all the projects and initiatives. I'm going to reserve a full update on that for our full board meeting on the 28th. But if y'all have any questions, always feel free to reach out to me or Janine. And that concludes my report.
Any comments from any directors for our TYLA folks? Like the State Bar Board, planning to meet in McAllen and having to change plans, TYLA Board was planning to meet in Waco next week. And of course, those plans have changed as well. So thanks to our QILA leadership for making that happen and pivoting so quickly and continuing on with your fine work as always. Next item on the agenda is a report from our Supreme Court liaison, but Justice Neerman was unable to attend, so there will be no report. Next item on the agenda is a report from our General Counsel, Ross Fisher.
Nothing to report, Trey.
Thank you, General Counsel Fisher. Good to see you. Okay. It is now 11:32 a.m. and the State Bar Board of Directors Executive Committee will now recess the open meeting and reconvene in closed session as authorized by Texas Government Code Section 551.071 for the purpose of consulting with legal counsel, including regarding pending or contemplated litigation, including McDonald v. Firth in the United States Supreme Court and Bennett versus State Bar of Texas in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Texas. With the exception of board liaisons and section representatives, all other individuals, including non-essential staff and other guests, need to excuse themselves from the closed session. At this time, we will have a 5-minute recess for our moderator to put all members of the 2021-2022 board, including section representatives and board liaisons, into a breakout room for the closed session. All other individuals, including non-essential staff and other guests, will remain watching the broadcast. We will notify the public when we are 5 minutes out from returning to open session. Any director who is attending by Zoom, please make sure your video remains on so that we can visually confirm your identity. Please do not use the chat feature while we are in closed session for open record purposes. All right, I now have 12:05 PM and the open session of the Board of Directors Executive Committee meeting will now reconvene. During the closed session, only matters relating to consultations with legal counsel concerning pending or contemplated litigation matters were discussed. No action was taken in closed session. That brings us to item number 20 on the agenda, which is adjournment. Before we get there, I just want to thank the members of this committee and all of the directors for your time and your participation in this meeting. This is what I feel, very necessary meeting leading up to our Board of Directors meeting, so that it helps everyone get kind of back on the same page after the holiday season. So thank you for the time and effort that you put into preparing for this meeting and the good discussion we've had. With that, are there any further comments or questions? I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by by immediate past President Brittany Harrison. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Seconded by Director David Cavillo. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Motion carries. We are adjourned.